morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Okay, yesterday I spoke on behalf of somebody else. This morning I'm speaking on behalf of myself, and I'm going to struggle to find my own voice. Look, again, it's a privilege to speak here at the 25th anniversary of ERF. And, you know, after following the brilliant presentation by Rohin, it's quite interesting, and I'm actually going to try to respond to him in the second part of my presentation. But the first thing I would like to do is to actually check how the World Bank has actually been following the evolution of the intangibles economy. How have we missed the boat? Have we actually been on the ball or not? That's the first thing I'm going to try to do. And this would be through findings of two World Development Reports. The first in 2016, it's called Digital Dividends. And the second, the 2019 World Development Report on the future of work. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. The second, I'm going to come back to Rohin's superb presentation. But what I'm going to do is to stop on a couple of measurement issues of the intangibles economy, and probably insist on one of the most important pitfalls, as I can see it, which is the R&D fundamentalism. And the third thing I'm going to do is to argue that innovation shouldn't be perceived just as creation of new ideas, but following Schumpeter, we should be thinking of innovation also as including application of all ideas to new things, new processes, and that's probably the most relevant for some of the low-income countries for which I work. So these are the three things I'm going to try to do. So, digital dividends is the report we came up with in 2016 at the World Bank. And what we did in that report that was quite interesting, though, is to try to capture all the transaction, all the electronic transaction in one day. And in one day, that day was May 29, 2015, we were already having 4.2 billion Google searches. We're having 36 million Amazon purchases in a day, 152 million Skype calls, 186 million Instagram photos, 8 billion YouTube videos watched, and 800 million tweets. And I want to remind you that this was actually before the Trump era. So that report also did something quite interesting, which is it mapped not only the potential benefits of these intangible economies, but also the potential risk. And that's what a good WDR does. You know, try to look ahead and find out where we may be falling short in the future. And among the most important benefits that we identified in 2016 WDR, innovation, efficiency, and inclusion were the top three. But these benefits would not be realized if some complementary policies or some complements are not implemented. And if they are not implemented, what could happen is that this economy could lead to more concentration, inequality, and control. I think those terms actually summarize most of the issues that were captured by Rohin last section of his discussion on what governments need to be watching out for and how we should try to tackle these questions. I would admit that the solution is not there yet, not even in the developed world, but we need to constantly be working to find those solutions if the digital revolution, if this intangibles economy is to actually turn out to be profitable for all. WDR 2019 follow up and look at how this new economy was changing work. And what it did was to actually document in a very, very interesting way how these intangibles have been growing. And again, superstars, new superstars firms, they all trade intangibles. And on this slide, coming from WDR 2019, you can see how fast M-Pesa has become. M-Pesa is the mobile money in Kenya, and how its share of the market has outpaced the largest bank in Kenya in just a few years. How Airbnb has been, has grown more than 2.5 times more than Marriott and Hilton combined in terms of number of beds, just in a couple of years. And Didi Xuxing in China, in terms of number of drivers, this is the Uber type of services in China. Just how this economy is growing has been phenomenal. And that growth is actually exponential in some of the cases. On this chart, you should probably see on the red line how IKEA, created in 1943, has taken that long to have stores in 49 countries. And compare that with Taobao in the orange ball, an online platform that has taken less than 10 years to have clients in 220 countries. And in the middle, you have Walmart that has taken since, from 1962 to 2017 to have stores in 28 countries. This, from my perspective, is giving really the magnitude of that intangible economy and how fast it's growing. But the intangible economy is also changing the way we work. And on that very nice picture, again, from the WDR, this is probably how some in this room are already working. I hope I would be working like this in the next, in my next life. But yes, number of people are already in a position to work just like this picture is. Less standard long-term contracts, more short-term, online work, but what is certainly also important is that while we are all enthusiastic about this new economy creating those new jobs, the number is still actually pretty low. It's still less than 3% of the global labor force. So most of the jobs would actually not be created through these digital entrepreneurs as we may be thinking, but through innovation penetrating and generating new activities or boosting efficiency in other set of activities. So what is also quite interesting on the labor market with the new intangibles economy is that the nature of skills needed to succeed is changing. And yes, technical skills are needed. We all think of coding and engineering skills, but what is even more important is the rise of the socio-economic skills as requirement for important important jobs. And the slide is actually showing how important skills like teamwork, willingness to learn, communication skills, interpersonal skills, analytical skills are all becoming mandatory for hiring top technical jobs. And this has to actually be brought back into the education system if we are to actually create the workforce of the future. Those soft skills, quote unquote, would become more and more valuable. So let me stop a little bit here and move to the second part of my, my presentation and try to come back to what Rohin has presented earlier. And the way I want to approach this is to address a couple of myths. I just read this book. I'm sorry for the advertising. I only advertise World Bank's books, but let me make an exception here. Just read this fascinating book by Mazzucato, and she is actually very, very, very incisively raising attention on a number of things. The myth that innovation is about R&D. And in every book on innovation, on any presentation, and certainly I will be doing the same thing, I'll show you something on R&D, but what she is highlighting is that R&D is probably not the only way to look at the innovation issue. And by the way, the point she's making is that there are very, very few studies which establish that innovation carried out at the firm level is actually linked with firm performance. In other words, the micro foundations of our macro theory on innovation are probably not that solid. That relationship we find at the macro level on innovation actually driving growth, it's probably not that robust. And there are a number of studies that actually do not find that link between innovation at the firm level and growth at the firm level. So this is certainly a question. The second myth is that patents are the best way to capture innovation. The point is that, if you just look at the number of patents and how they are increasing and conclude that the country is innovating, it may be completely misleading, because sometimes those number of patents increase as a result of changes in patent law, or actually changing in strategic behavior, and that was discussed earlier. So yes, I think these two myths are important to have in mind as we continue this discussion on intangible. And then let me throw in one very provocative one, and you'll not be surprised that it's coming from Joe Stiglitz. He was speaking at the World Bank 2 weeks ago, and one of his points was that we should stop focusing so much on IPRs because they are a social construct. And we were all shocked, I was shocked, and his explanation was actually pretty simple. IPRs are not exogenous, they are the product of a political system, a global system, and they are not neutral. And he gave his own example when he was advisor to President, when he was chairing the Council of, the Presidential Council or Economic Advisory Council, on how they designed the IPR rules to favor the US. So it's not that neutral, and that, to me, I thought was important to highlight as we discuss how the global community should actually handle the fruits of this new economy. Now, let me probably quickly talk about another set of issues that were raised in my colleague's Bill Maloney's recent book on the innovation paradox. And there are three very, very important points. The paradox is basically because there are quite high returns to innovation, but very low investment in the middle income and low income countries. But the biggest paradox is the policy paradox, where you have a number of, where you actually have a number of market failures when it comes to innovation. But, and those market failures would require strong and well-equipped government to manage innovation policy, but the capacity of our government in low-income countries is just so weak that they cannot actually address this properly. And what to do about it? Three things. One, again, avoid R&D fundamentalism and work on complementarities. Work on policies that could actually help countries accumulate in parallel physical and human capital as much as the focus on innovation or high-end innovation. The second is building firms' capabilities for innovation and for technological capabilities as well, but also managerial capabilities. And there are a series of very good papers by John Renan and Van Renan and two other colleagues showing how these managerial capabilities influence, firm-level innovation. The third is to build government capabilities to manage innovation. And one very important point, Mazzucato makes also is that governments should move beyond just addressing market failures and probably concentrate on creating markets when it comes to innovation. And that's an important point because the book actually shows how much the state was instrumental in Apple's success. How the iPod was actually the fruit of government research of more than 10 different institutions in the US. So these are quite important points. Let me close, as the chair is signaling that my time is coming to an end. Let me close by probably just sharing two examples that would confirm the need for low-income countries and other middle-income countries to focus on those complementarities, because innovation is actually affecting these societies in a very, very different way. Two examples: agriculture in Africa. 2 years ago, the Financial Times had this article about how technology is the hope for agriculture in Africa, with farmers using cell phones as a way to manage disease in their farms, as Nigerian now using Uber-like services. Hello Tractor is an Uber-like service that is now boosting productivity in Nigerian agriculture. More than 22,000 farmers are now using those tractors. Call them on your phone, pay with mobile money. They come for 1 hour and deploy your land. Here is an example. And what is quite interesting is those tractors actually have a tracker. So they have web-based monitoring device attached to these tractors, which send information on the soil, on many other elements to companies. So this is already happening. So we shouldn't be debating if the digital or the intangible economy is actually good for Africa or not, or if we should embark on it. It's already happening. Either we embark on it and leverage it, or we will be obsolete soon. One last example of how these technologies are really changing the way work is done in Africa is healthcare in Rwanda, where drones are now being used to deliver all the vaccines in a country that would not have been able to build the roads given the geography and the mountainous geography of the country to deliver those vaccines and medication in rural areas. This is already happening, and this is in line with the publication that my office produced 2 years ago called Leapfrogging the Future to African Development, with a question mark. But we do believe there are areas where Africa can leverage this intangible economy to leapfrog and reduce significantly poverty. Thank you very much.